Hi there, my name is Will, and today I'm going to walk you through how you can use Supabase databases in conjunction with Kestra. Now, if you've never heard of Supabase is basically a backend-as-a-service where they've got products such as databases, authentication, and storage available for you to then tap your front-end app into. Now, we can actually use some of this with Kestra by using the Postgres plugin. So let's have a look at that. Now, Supabase database is basically just hosted Postgres for you. So you've got a wonderful database ready to use without the hassle of managing it. And so what we can do is head over to Kestra and we can create a new workflow that will allow us to connect to it. What we can do inside of Kestra is use the Postgres plugin, which I have available here. And as we can see here, this is just simply connecting to a Postgres database using the username and password parameters, and then we can run any queries that we like. Now, in order for us to be able to connect to this database, we do need to get a few things such as a URL as well as a username and password. So let's log into Supabase and set up our first database. Now, to sign in to Supabase, all you need to do is click sign in, and it's going to prompt you to sign in with either your own username and password, or in my case, GitHub. Once you're signed in, you can create a brand new project. When you create a new project, you might be prompted to create a new organization. You can keep this quite straightforward. I'm going to call mine Will's org. Now, once we've done that, we can give our project a name. I'm going to call this Kestra video. And after that, we need to create a strong password, which is what we're going to use to authenticate with the database. So this is what we're going to use inside of Kestra. What I can do is use the generate a password button here to be able to get us one ready to go. And what we can do to make our life a little easier is heading back to Kestra and going to namespaces. We can actually go to the company.team namespace and the key value store, and we can actually save our password here so that we can access it later. So now I've saved this in the key value store, I can reference this later. So back to Supabase, I'm going to set my region to West Europe as that's where I'm located, and then I'm going to create a new project. Once it's created, it's going to offer all of the different services that Supabase has, but we're going to go over to databases on the side here, and then we'll be presented with our database. Now, what I'm going to do is create a new table here, and I'm going to call this table Kestra example, like so. And then all I'm going to do is then press save, and we're going to see it's create our new table that we can access. Now, by default, it's actually added 2 columns, which we can just quickly delete because we want to be able to add our own columns a little bit later to match something inside of Kestra. So now that we have an empty table with no columns and nothing else, so the next step is now jumping into Kestra and getting it connected. Now, what we're going to do inside of Kestra is set up a plugin default. So anytime we use the Postgres task inside of our workflow, it's going to automatically use the URL, username, and password all ready to go. So we haven't got to copy and paste it multiple times. Now, to get the information that we need, we can press this connect button at the top of Supabase. And here it will give us loads of different options of how we want to connect to our database. Now, using Kestra, the plugin that we're using, which is the Postgres plugin, uses JDBC. So let's select that, and that will give us a URL here with everything we need. But there are 3 different connection types. So let's have a look at those and understand what we're trying to do. Now, the first one is for persistent connections, something like a web app or, like it says here, a virtual machine. Now, we're not doing that. What we're doing is a workflow that is going to periodically run, talk to the database, and then do nothing. So actually scrolling down, the transaction pool is a much better fit for us because our workflow is stateless. So let's copy this URL and we can actually view the parameters. So we've got our host here. We can see it's running on port 6543. So a little different to the default Postgres port. We've also got our username here, and then obviously the password that we set earlier. So I'm going to copy this URL and I'm going to go back to Kestra and I'm going to set the URL property now to that property that we already had. Now I will need to make one amendment. So inside of my quotes here, you'll see at the bottom, we have your password, which is a template for where we can put our actual password. Now, if I was to just quickly put in some brackets here, I can actually then reference the password that we already put inside of the key value store using an expression. So now when I press save, our workflow is going to know the password is in the key value store, but I haven't exposed it to the workflow, which is the key thing here. So I'm able to access that. I've got my username here as well. Now, if I wanted, I could also use the username property like this, and I could actually just take out the username like this and paste it in its own property field just like that. I can also do the same with the password. So here I can put my expression again inside of quotes, and I can now access our database. So let's change this log task now to be able to query the database. Now, as you've seen from a lot of my examples, I love using this orders.csv example that has a bunch of different data, some different product IDs, prices, and whatnot. And what I want to do is take this file, download it to Kestra, and then put it inside of our database in Supabase so we can access the data. So what we need to do first of all is add columns to our database, because at the moment our table is very empty and just simply copying the CSV file isn't going to work. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get rid of this log task, and instead we're going to replace it with a new create columns task that looks a little bit like this. So we've got all the columns that we had in that CSV file that are now set up inside of this query. So what we can do now is create those columns inside of our database. Now our database, I've made sure it's named with an underscore here. So I've renamed it to Kestra underscore example. And in here, I've got a query here that's going to alter the Kestra example table and then add a number of columns. So what I'm going to do is execute this task now, and we're going to see it's going to add those columns to our table. Just like that, we can see it was successful. And if I now go back to Supabase and refresh, we'll see that we've got all of those column names now at the top. So now what we can do is create a new workflow that's going to copy in the data from our CSV file. So now what we're going to see is where Kestra comes in handy. This CSV file is just simply stored on Hugging Face. And so by using the HTTP download task, we can download it to Kestra and have Kestra automatically pass it to our Postgres task using CopyIn. So what you can see here, using an expression, we're saying, take this CSV file, it has headers, these are the column names, so you know which columns to match to which, and its delimiter is a comma. So with that in mind, oh, and of course the table name, it will now know, okay, I've got all the information I need, let's get this CSV file put into your database. So when I execute this, we'll see that it's going to be able to put that data in, download it to begin with, and then it's going to copy it in. So now, as we can see, Supabase now has all of our data in just like that at the click of a finger. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how you can easily set up your Supabase project so that you can then get a database connected with Kestra and then have Kestra performing some automations for you directly to your database. Hopefully you found this useful. If you have any other questions about Supabase, let us know in the comments below. We're exploring the option of creating a plugin, so if this is something that you'd be interested in, let us know.